Welcome back, MTG Burgeoning community, and welcome back, YouTube viewing audience. If you are still part of the latter and wish to join the former, click that subscribe button now. By doing so, you become eligible for all of this channel's sweet rewards. In today's Build a Deck Tuesday video, we continue our series of building around Lord Windgrace. Welcome back, Burgeonites and YouTube viewing audience. In today's Build a Deck Tuesday video, we are continuing our EDH Commander build with our General, Lord Windgrace. If you missed any previous installments in this series, you can click on the links below and catch up. You can also click on the tappedout.net link in the description below to see the deck list as it stands right now. We're going to continue with Lord Windgrace, and we're building a Lands Matter deck around our commander, our general, Lord Windgrace. These are the cards that have already been included in the deck thus far. Lotus Cobra, Scute Swarm, Morag, Fury of Akum, Valakut Exploration, Omnath, Locus of Rage, Rampaging Baloths, Tireless Tracker, Avenger of Zendikar, Scapeshift, Crucible of Worlds, Life from the Loam, Ancient Green Warden, Reshape the Earth, Nahiri's Lithoforming, Splendid Reclamation, Realms Uncharted, Azusa Lost But Seeking, the Gitrog Monster, Exploration, Wayward Swordtooth, Mina and Den Wildborn, Ramunap Excavator, Burgeoning, Sword of the Animist. And again, to get deeper, in-depth descriptions about the relevance and importance of these cards, you can click on any of the links in the description below to bring you right up to speed. And in today's video, we are going to add 12 more cards that help us to get lands from everywhere onto the battlefield to trigger all of our various landfall abilities. And we're going to start with a contribution from Zendikar Rising, Roiling Regrowth. 2 and a green at instant speed. We sacrifice our land and then we search our library for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So we get a land into our graveyard, which can be used for a future land drop if we have a play a land from your graveyard enabler in play. And we also get 2 basic lands straight from our library into play, having 2 separate landfall triggers for each of our permanents that have the landfall mechanic. So Roiling Regrowth is card number 1 in this subset of 12. Next up, in a card structurally and functionally similar to Roiling Regrowth with a couple of differences, and that card is going to be Harrow from Original Zendikar. 2 and a green. As an additional cost to cast Harrow, we sacrifice a land. That's the difference between Harrow and Roiling Regrowth, is as an additional cost, we must sacrifice Harrow. So if for some reason one of our opponents uses counter magic to counterspell Harrow, not only do we not get the 2 lands from our library, but we also lose a land in addition to the spell itself, because sacrificing a land was an additional cost to cast Harrow. That's unlike Roiling Regrowth, where if it were countered, we don't lose the land. However, if we can get through the walls of potential counterspells and have Harrow resolve, it does the exact same thing that Roiling Regrowth does. It puts a land into our graveyard to use for a future land drop if we have a graveyard to play enabler like Crucible of Worlds or Ramunap Excavator. And it also puts 2 basic lands from our library into play tapped. Again, triggering our landfall abilities 2 times. Card number 2 of this subset of 12 is Harrow. Next up, we have a creature that mimics both what Roiling Regrowth and Harrow does. on the body of a 1/1 elf druid, and this contribution comes from Modern Horizons, and it's Spring Bloom Druid. 2 and a green. When Spring Bloom Druid enters the battlefield, we may sacrifice a land. If we do, we search our library for up to 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. So again, similar to Roiling Regrowth and Harrow, Spring Bloom Druid puts a land into our graveyard for potential future use, and fetches out 2 basic lands from our library, putting them into play, and again, triggering our landfall abilities 2 times each. Number 4 on our list, going back to our instant speed land fetchers, we have 1 copy of Crop Rotation. As an additional cost to cast this spell, we sacrifice a land. We search our library for a land card and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Again, similar to the previous 3 cards in this subset of cards, we get a land card into the graveyard for future use, and then we can search our library not for a basic, but for any land. And once we install the land base, you're going to see it's going to be very evident why Crop Rotation is going to be such a valuable card in this Juned Lands Matter deck. And again, it's any land, and it comes into play untapped. Number 4 is Crop Rotation. A third of the way through, we move to number 5 on our list, and that's going to be a copy of Skyshroud Claim. 3 and a green sorcery, we search our library for up to 2 forest cards and put them onto the battlefield. Notice the text here, it says forest cards. It doesn't say basic forests. So we can use this to our advantage by fetching out Shocklands, by fetching out any of the other lands like Cinderglade or maybe Sheltered Thicket, any land that has forest in the what is that called? Oh, geez. That has forest in the sub-name can be fetched out with Skyshroud Claim. So that's our Overgrown Tomb, that's our Stomping Ground, that's Cinderglade. Or if we need to, we just grab a couple of basic forests and put them into play. Skyshroud Claim is number 5. Number 6, we've got the original, the Kodama's Reach. 2 and a green, we search our library for up to 2 basic lands, we reveal them, we put 1 into play tapped, which will trigger a landfall ability, put the other land into our hand, which of course we will then play at some point in time, triggering our landfall abilities again. So for the purposes of this deck, Kodama's Reach will most likely read, search our library for a couple of lands, put 1 into play tapped, then play the other one, particularly with all of the additional land drop enablers we have in this deck thus far. And if we have Kodama's Reach, you know we're going to also play a copy of Cultivate. 2 and a green, it's Kodama's Reach number 2. All things said about Kodama's Reach applies to Cultivate. Kodama's Reach, a card so good they reprinted it with a different name. Next up, as we round out to card number 8 of this 12-card subset, we come across Creeping Renaissance. For 3 and double green, this rare sorcery from Innistrad reads, choose a permanent type, then return all cards of the chosen type from our graveyard to our hand. More likely than not, we are going to select lands in order to get all of the lands that are in our graveyard back into our hand, allowing us to play them from our hand, triggering our landfall abilities, and just giving us an additional outlet to play those lands. Plus, it has the flashback mechanic, which for 5 and double green, we can cast this card from our graveyard and then exile it. Of course, we could pick creatures, artifacts, enchantments. I mean, any permanent card will suffice. For the intents and purposes of this deck, however, choosing land will probably be its most popular use. All right, so we're going heavy here on the green, but we're in green and we're playing Lands Matter, so that's why we're playing pretty much every possible green card we can. At least our next contributor here at number 9 has a splash of a different color. And for that, we're going to go to War of the Spark, and we're going to talk about Living Twister. Double red and a green. It's a 2/5 elemental. We can tap 1 in a red and discard a land card, and Living Twister deals shock. I mean, it deals 2 points to any target, 2 points of damage to any target. Additionally, we can tap a green and return a tapped land we control to its owner's hand, which, let's face it, most likely is going to be returning one of our lands to our hand. So let's break down each of these different abilities. If we have a graveyard to play land enabler, we can tap one in a red, we can discard a land from our hand to shock something, and then play that land from our graveyard. That's value. And additionally, for the second ability, if we have no lands to play, and we have multiple land drops that we could, utilize during our turn, we can tap a forest, return it to our hand, play it, trigger our landfall abilities, and then keep repeating that process until we use up all of our available land drops. Living Twister is going to be a sneaky good card in this deck as it allows us to put some lands in positions into different outlets so that we can play them again, either from the graveyard or from the battlefield. All right, we're down to our last three in number 10. We're going back to original Zendikar for a copy of Oracle of Moldiah. Now, disclaimer here, I'm not a fan of Oracle of Moldiah. I am a pretty stringent deck builder when it comes to constructing my various decks in Magic, and one of my deck building principles is I do not want to tip off my opponents to anything. That extends far past deck building to deck storage and sleeves, as I try to keep my sleeves and my decks in the same colors and the same color deck boxes. I don't want my opponents tipped off ever until we're already into the game. So with Oracle of Moldiah's middle ability, with Oracle of Moldiah's third ability saying we may play the the middle ability. Let's try this again. And there's just so many abilities for this elf shaman. For Oracle of Moldiah's middle ability to play with the top card of our library revealed, it goes against one of my major deck building principles because I don't want my opponents to know what's in my deck. I don't want them to know what's on top of my library. I don't want them to know what I'm drawing and putting into my hand. It's disadvantageous. However, the first and third abilities are going to overpower my disdain of the second ability, because for the purposes of this deck, Oracle Moldiah lets us play an additional land on each of our turns, and we may play the top card of our library if it's a land card. So having an additional land drop per turn is very valuable in a Land Matters deck, and playing the top card of our library if it's a land card enables an additional land outlet similar to our hand, the graveyard, and the battlefield. So much to my dismay, we're going to include a copy of Oracle of Moldiah in this deck. I don't like it, but it's for the best of the deck. So we're going to go with it, and we're going to see how it shakes out, folks. All right, number 11, we're going to Theros Beyond Death for this sorcery, and it is Nylea's Intervention. For X and double green, we have a bimodal spell that lets us choose one. We may either search our library for up to X land cards, reveal them, and put them into our hand, or we can have Nylea's Intervention deal twice X damage to each creature with flying. The removal spell specific to flyers is quite valuable because we're not going to have a deck with a great number of flyers. And although that particular piece of removal is valuable, let's be honest, the first ability is the one that makes this card's presence into the deck warranted. We can search our library for any X land cards. Notice the text, folks. It does not say basic lands. So we're looking for any X land cards. We reveal them and put them into our hand. This ensures future land drops, particularly if we have the ability to play more than one land per turn. Nylea's Intervention is going to restock our hand with the one resource that's going to be most precious to us for this deck, lands. And that comes to number 12 and the last card of this subset of June Land Matters cards in this Lord Windgrace EDH Commander build. And for that, we're going to Gatecrash, and it's a mythic, and we're staying in green, but we're going to again splash some red. We got Borborygmos Enraged. For double red and double green, it's a 7/6 Cyclops with Trample. And whenever Borborygmos Enraged deals combat damage to a player, we reveal the top 3 cards of our library. We put all land cards revealed this way into our hand and the rest into our graveyard. So if Borborygmos can deal some combat damage, we can get some more lands from our library into our hand in order to do what we need to do, play those lands and trigger those landfall abilities. Additionally, it has a second ability that lets us discard a land card and have Borborygmus deal 3 damage to any target. So if we have, again, one of those graveyard to battlefield land enablers like Crucible of Worlds or Ramunap Excavator, we can discard a land, lightning bolt something, and then play it from the graveyard. Very, very good value right there, folks. A free lightning bolt every single time, and we can still play the land. Borborygmus Enrage is going to do some heavy lifting in this deck, both from the top of our library and by getting land cards into the graveyard. And Burgeoning fans, that is it. This closes out this episode of Lord Windgrace Lands Matter. For the next video, let's turn our attention away from our lands and start looking at our opponents and what they're going to plan to do and their paths to victory. Let's start putting together a subset of removal spells. Now we're looking for some targeted removal, and we're looking for some board wipes, and we're going to have to pack in some I don't know how we say this, pack in some pretty versatile spells, because once people see what we're trying to do, we're most likely going to become a target. So leave up to 10 suggestions for some really good removal spells in the comment section below or over on MTG Burgeoning's tappedout.net page for Lord Windgrace Lands Matter. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks. Strap in, because we're riding Lord Windgrace all the way to the finish line.